So, I recently spent about 2 weeks in a hospital in Nagoya, Japan. Don't worry, I'm fine. Everything worked out so far. Of course, that's what everyone wanted to know first when I got out. But second, not how were the doctors, not how was the treatment, not the part where I had tubes sticking into me multiple times. Nope, the next question from almost everyone was, what's the food like? Which is very on brand for the internet. So, in the interest of satisfying humanity's deep and apparently insatiable curiosity about what sick people in Japan are eating, here we go. I should mention one thing up front though. For the first 4 days, I wasn't allowed to eat anything at all, just water after the first 2 days. Which means by the time actual food finally showed up, my critical faculties were not exactly at their sharpest. I would have given 5 stars to a bowl of natto. But I did eventually eat enough meals over 2 weeks to give you a pretty thorough picture of what Japanese hospital food actually looks like. And it turns out, it's genuinely interesting. Not exciting, but interesting. There's a difference, and we'll get into it. But first, as always, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do, and share it with anyone you think might be interested about all things Japan. It really helps. Let's start with the basic Japanese hospital food philosophy, because it explains a lot. In a lot of Western countries, and I'll be a bit diplomatic here, hospital food has a reputation. And that reputation is not very good. If you've ever eaten a hospital meal in the UK or the US, you probably know what I mean. Beige, vaguely warm, texturally ambiguous, food that exists technically. But in Japan the approach is different. Hospital meals here are considered part of the medical treatment itself, not an afterthought, not something you suffer through between doctor's visits. Part of the actual care plan. Every hospital has registered dietitians, not just kitchen staff, but qualified nutritionists who design the meals based on each patient's condition, their recovery stage, and their specific nutritional needs. At any given time, a Japanese hospital kitchen might be preparing dozens of different meal variations, reduced salt diets, diabetic meals, post-surgery diets, soft food diets, or full regular meals. They even control the texture of food based on how well a patient can chew or swallow. So, what lands on your tray isn't chosen for excitement, it's chosen because someone, somewhere, looked at your chart and made a deliberate decision, which is either reassuring or slightly unsettling depending on your relationship with medical authority. Either way, the food is intentional, and that changes how you experience it. I personally was in an internal medicine ward in a room shared with 3 other patients. I would have liked the comfort of a private suite, but even in Japan where medical things are relatively inexpensive, staying in such is not. Meals arrived 3 times a day on a tray, delivered right to your bedside. No menu, no ordering system, no choosing between option A and option B. Before I started eating food, a nutritionist asked me if I had any allergies or dietary restrictions, and I said no. And from that point on, the meals were pretty much decided for me, which I actually didn't mind, because decision fatigue is real, and I was already dealing with a lot. The one thing that became immediately clear from day 1 of eating, the portions were very small, like impressively small, thoughtfully small, small in a way that suggested careful planning had gone into making them exactly that size. Great if you're trying to lose weight, somewhat challenging if you're, say, a grown adult who's very hungry. One thing you'll notice quickly in a Japanese hospital is the amount of okayū, or rice porridge, that they serve. First of all, we should all know rice is a basic staple in meals in Japan, so that's what you get with every meal in Japan. I didn't have any bread or potatoes or anything like that, even noodles. But you get rice. This is not an accident. Instead of regular rice, patients are often given rice cooked with extra water to make it softer, gentler, and easier on the digestive system. And hospitals actually measure this on a scale. You get 30% rice porridge, or 50% rice porridge, or 70% rice porridge. The higher the percentage, the closer it gets to what you'd normally recognize as rice. At 30%, you're essentially eating a watery mixture that politely gestures in the direction of rice. At 70%, you're nearly back to real life. The idea is that as you recover, your meals gradually progress up through these stages. Your digestive system gets a kind of gentle onboarding process, a rehabilitation program for your stomach. It's a smart system, honestly, and once you understand it, watching your porridge percentage climb becomes weirdly motivating, like leveling up, but the prize is just slightly less watery rice. My first real meal after 4 days of nothing was dinner. And let me be transparent, I was not in a position to be objective. The tray arrived, there was some grilled, marinated fish flaked into small pieces, some wilted spinach, some simmered daikon radish, and a small fruit puree, and the aforementioned rice porridge. This one was 30%. Very simple, very gentle, designed for a body that had essentially forgotten what food was. Did it taste good? Honestly? Kinda yes. Genuinely. But I want to acknowledge that after 96 hours without eating, I would have had a meaningful emotional response to just about anything, so take that as you will. The important thing is, it was light, it was clean, it didn't make me feel worse, and after 4 days in a hospital, that clears a pretty high bar. Day 2 followed a pretty classic meal structure. Breakfast included miso soup, rice porridge again, 30%, some vegetables, fruit puree again, and I appreciated this detail, a small Yakult probiotic drink, which was kind of sweet. For those unfamiliar, Yakult is a tiny bottle of fermented milk that Japan is extremely serious about. The fact that it appeared on a hospital tray made perfect sense. The Japanese probiotic game is not casual. Lunch was an omelette with sautéed vegetables and canned tangerines on the side. Dinner was stewed chicken with onions and greens. The food was genuinely pretty good. The flavors were mild, recognizably Japanese home cooking, the kind of thing you'd eat on a quiet Tuesday night at home, but actually pleasant. And here's something I noticed. As a foreigner, this works slightly in your favor. You're not comparing the hospital food to your grandmother's cooking, and you're not thinking, this is how my mum made it. It's just some Japanese food, which is interesting enough on its own terms. Now, Japanese patients, I imagine, might find it slightly more monotonous, but for me, the novelty brought some goodwill. By day 3, the rice porridge had been upgraded to 70%. Progress. Breakfast was egg and tofu dumplings with greens and some miso soup. Lunch was teriyaki salmon with a light vegetable salad. And dinner was chicken in a Chinese-style sauce. Now, I'll be honest about the dinner this time. It was not good. Everything up to that point had been fine. Some of it had been genuinely enjoyable. But that chicken in a Chinese-style sauce, I don't know what happened. The flavors were a Japanese interpretation of what Chinese food should be like. For me personally, at the best of times, I don't really like basic Chinese food in Japan, and this wasn't the best of times. I mention this not to be unfair, but because it's important to acknowledge even good systems have some bad dishes sometimes, and no hospital kitchen is batting 1,000. Apart from that one outlier, the food remained pretty decent. The real problem, consistently, was quantity for me. Everything was small. Each meal felt like it was designed for someone who needed significantly less food than I did. By the end of each day, I wasn't in pain. I was just aware of being an oversized human for Japan in a small portion system. Then I had to have another procedure, which meant 3 more days without food, again. I don't have much to add about this period other than to say at least the second time around you can prepare yourself mentally for it, and keep asking the doctors and nurses for when you can start eating again. When eating resumed, the hospital reset the progression, back to softer foods, back to lower percentage porridge, back to the beginning of the ladder. Which makes complete clinical sense. Doesn't mean it was fun to be back at 30% rice after you'd worked your way up to 70%. Over the following days, the meals cycled through the usual rotation. Boiled tofu with miso soup, simmered salmon, grilled whitefish, braised daikon, pumpkin, some small portions of fruit. Very traditional and very Japanese tasting and very consistent. By the final days, I was back up to 70% rice porridge. The portions had not changed, and my appetite had not really adjusted. By the time I left, I was notably lighter than when I'd arrived. 10 kilograms, or 20 pounds lighter to be exact, which I suppose is one way to look at it. I want to take a quick moment to talk about the one vending machine on my floor of the hospital. Because Japan as a country has a vending machine for everything. I'm sure you've heard about it. Hospitals, train stations, schools, even mountain hiking trails, vending machines are everywhere, at all times, usually fully stocked. The one in my hospital had the usual lineup: hot and cold drinks, tea, coffee, sports drinks. But there was a small sign on it that I found quietly remarkable. In the event of a major disaster, an earthquake, a tsunami, the machine automatically unlocks and the drinks become free. Anyone nearby can access water and beverages immediately, without payment, without needing a card or coins. This is a real widespread feature across Japan. Emergency mode vending machines are built into the infrastructure of everyday life here. It's part of the national disaster preparedness culture. The same culture that gives you earthquake alerts on your phone at 3 in the morning and neighborhood disaster drills on Sundays if you live here. And I found it oddly moving in a very Japanese way. A vending machine, just sitting there in a hospital room, ready to give everything away the moment things go badly. And I think that's great. Overall, Japanese hospital food was better than I expected. And not in the sense that it was delicious, or that I looked forward to meal times the way you might at a good restaurant, but it was thoughtful, it was healthy, and it did taste Japanese. It was clearly designed by people who had thought carefully about what a recovering body actually needs. The portion sizes might humble you, there's no getting around this, but the system makes sense. The food is treated as medicine, not in a cold clinical way, but in a practical one. Each meal is calibrated, each stage of the progression is deliberate. The whole thing reflects a broader philosophy that I think is genuinely worth admiring, even when you're lying there still hungry. If you're a foreigner in a Japanese hospital, the food might actually be one of the less stressful parts of the experience. The language barrier, the paperwork, the very specific customs around inpatient care, these are things that'll get to you. The food, you'll probably be fine. You'll just be slightly hungry, which, all things considered, is not the worst outcome. Anyway, that's my version of what hospital food is really like in Japan. I hope you find this useful in an entirely hypothetical way and never have to apply any of it in practice. If you did find it interesting, you know what to do, and I'll see you in the next video.